Hello there! Welcome to the ReZero podcast. I'm your host, Wolf.
I'm your host, Gold.
I'm your host, Connor.
And today, gentlemen, we'll be talking about ReZero EX5. Finally, we have arrived.
Yeah, thank you for your patience, Gold. I know you've been waiting for this one for a while.
Finally, some good fucking food. I mean, sorry, we can censor that out the first minute of the episode. Yeah. But honestly, yeah, this EX novel is obviously the content in it, the characters in it, all the stuff that I personally fixated upon very quickly when I heard about it. I was like, oh yeah, this is something I have to read just personally by myself. And I was right. I had to read this for reasons that I knew I had to read this and for reasons that I didn't.
Yeah.
I appreciated reading this book after Arc 8 and even after what's come out for Arc 9 already a lot. It made it feel really impressive at the seeds that Tappei had laid down, and it gave better, we'll call it foreshadowing and setup for some of the stuff to come. I appreciated that he did have it out and ready. I do wish some of that stuff had made it into the full story. I get why it's a full EX novel, though.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're at the age-old thing in which we say that, because we say that every single time in terms of like, this should probably have been in the main story. We
did it for one.
Yeah.
EX1 did it.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like, for me, I think like a lot of times that we say that, I just think there's like a form and content issue sometimes in Tappei's writing where he's like, well, it's not related to Subaru's perspective exactly right in this moment, so how am I supposed to shoehorn in a flashback, you know? And that's like this long of a flashback. I think that's usually what he ends up thinking, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I totally get not putting the whole story in there. It's literally maybe 3 different things that he put in at different parts of mostly the second chunk.
Yeah.
That I think deserved to have been in the main story, because it really did feel like some surprises later on were so sudden and random that it was unusual for ReZero's setup in like mystery box style.
There's a lot of like moments in Arc 7, you know, which is almost like necessary because it's a new setting, but it's also one of those times where it's like, and then this person fights off, and then they're a dragon person, and then the dragon, they summon down the dragon from the sky, and then it's like, what happened? And you're like, who's this person? Why is they a dragon? Like, you know, and you're like, okay, I guess I'm going with it. And that's part of it. And then you're like, well, maybe they should have built up to this a little bit more. I guess this is what these EX novels are for in a sense, or they should be, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, one of the things that I think this book especially did was it made me enjoy the character of Balleroy Temoglyph more.
Yes.
Almost to the extent that I wish EX4 existed even less. Because to go from, say, you read EX5 and you meet this character, and then you go into like the latter half of Arc 7 and then onwards into Arc 8, and you get to the point of, oh, he made it all the way to the Divine General but died to Julius? Like,
yeah,
that is such like a jump. And then you slowly get the pieces brought in through the main story. But I liked him a lot here. It really felt more connected, especially to the characters we know. Him calling Priscilla wife-san or Mrs. Wife this whole time, just like Flop does, made me smile so much.
Yeah. There's a lot of like really good parallelism in this exact book that is just so bewildering to me, because I'm like, oh, it's just so perfect. Like, now I understand that a lot of these characters introduced in the main story are exactly parallels to things going on in the modern, like, it's like the past in the modern, you know, Arc 7 story is like overlapping in itself, you know. And I think that's whichever way you considered it, you know, whether you thought about, okay, we have to go to Gladiator Island because we have to understand Al's past, and we have to understand, you know, that Subaru is succeeding where Al failed, you know, like, it's all those things, you know, or he's actually liberating the island, whereas Al was just opportunist and was just like, yeah, I guess I don't really want to, you know, leave, you know, that type of thing.
I would, for those of you at home who might not be considering reading some of these books, I would say that EX5 feels very much like Star Wars The Clone Wars does.
Yes.
Where it is not a necessary piece of content to go through the movies to watch like the Clone Wars, but it makes episode 3 better if you've seen the Clone Wars, even in hindsight. And this book made arc 7 and 8 just a little bit better for me as well, just because of the hindsight that it can provide to it.
Mm-hmm. I do like that analogy a lot. The Clone Wars was my childhood.
Yeah, there's a very Clone Wars-esque aspect to this, and you're exactly right in the theming of like the main story tells the story succinctly enough. This adds things that are very like deeper in a sense, like even in the character motivations that we're getting on this, with their backstories and stuff like that. It's like we'll talk about it, but like the way in which it frames Priscilla and even Vincent. Like all the stuff that we get into their relationship. We get more about Al and Al's like weird brooding that's going on. We get more about Priscilla and Arkia's relationship and how that's like deeper form than you even thought. And then like it really does add another flavor to most of the situations. And unlike EX1 or sorry EX what was it EX4. Unlike EX4, the characters in this don't feel like just cameos for the sake of cameos. They all have their personality shine through. They all feel like deservedly there. They all feel like they have unique perspectives to offer in the moment that they exist on the page. Like you even like reading like Olbart there, or like any of the Divine Generals, they feel like they're themselves. They don't feel like they're just there to be like, oh, I'm gonna pose and do a cool action move.
Yeah,
it's like, oh no, they're saying and having the thoughts that you'd think they'd have,
Mm-hmm.
I was very much impressed by how consistent Pei's character work was with this novel into what I know of a lot of these characters in Arc 7. I think it added a lot for me in the sense that I was already invested in characters like Priscilla and Al, it for different reasons, obviously. But this has added, like, just reading from their perspective each half or a book has really helped me, like, ground myself into these characters and really start thinking more about what their motivations are. Because those are a bit more mysterious in the main story. And obviously, when you're seeing everything from Subaru's perspective, he's a very biased narrator, right? Like, he sees things from a very moral, black and white perspective, and that has only very recently started to change. But seeing this more ruthless view, even from a child as Priska and Priscilla, and then with Al's like just fucking lack of care about everything around him, it's just like, wow, there's loads of different shades of morality in this world, and you really feel it as from these different protagonists in the book.
Yeah, I completely agree. Obviously I got a lot out of the second chunk for this story. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to communicate all of my thoughts in today's podcast because Arc 8 has given me some answers, even more so with 9. So all I'll say is my views and theories on Al had already changed. This cemented them a bit more. I feel a little bit more confident in some of them. And it was cool to get a little bit of art of the back of his head on the cover of this book, and of his lower chin and the random part in it. Although, did you two catch that one of the insert art pieces was wrong? There was a shot of Arakia after they're on the island, like with Olbart. And she has on her original clothes. When she should have Al's shirt ripped in 2 pieces.
I did notice that too. I was like, oh, no!
Yeah, they probably could have.
Once I noticed that, I couldn't unsee it. I was like, what? Why is this not continuity?
Osaka was like, or he wrote to Otsuka, draw Arkia and Olbart standing next to each other looking smug. And then it's like, here's the design that I have. I have her dock right there, and her character sheet right there.
I wouldn't be surprised if the editor even like kind of intersects as to what parts of the story should be illustrated.
Oh yeah, I believe so. At least some input.
It seems to mostly just be main character introductions and big moments
Big
that are
moments.
callbacks to the main series.
Yeah.
Big callback moments, or like, yeah, it's usually like introduction of a character that's going to be important, their design, or whatever, you know. But yeah, there's a lot of really good art in this book. Thinking about that now, I mean, I just really like. I think the scenarios are really cool in this book. So a lot of the, menacing poses people are doing, a lot of the cool action things. I mean, we'll get to it when we start going through the very first part of the book. But like, the child designs of all the characters are cool, and it's interesting to say that because it feels like we're getting the other half of the people that have their child designs in the Arc 7
Yes.
as the
true.
Flash book, yeah, because they aren't children, childified, but we still get them as children here.
Yeah.
So that's a neat way of kind of completing that sort of saga in a way.
Yeah, so I guess we can jump into the first story in here.
Yeah, we should definitely discuss the first story first.
So I loved this a lot, except for one kind of pivotal thing more towards the end. But I really, really enjoyed getting to see Lamia, Palladio, and the other siblings more.
Yes.
Yeah, here's your introduction to them, Wolf. I mean, I read this beforehand, so when they showed back up in end of Arc 7, I was like, I know these people. Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, it adds a lot more hype to these people being back for me at the end of Arc 7, now knowing a bit more about who they are and their relationships with other characters.
Yeah, it's personal now. They want.
Yeah, exactly. It feels more personal. And boy, can I just praise to pay on this in that the setup of the Valachian royal family is so good for like conflict and writing tension. The world building he set up with it is such a fun device to make conflict within the story. So I'm so glad he decided to bring them back in the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, it's really. I mean, just to kind of get into the Imperial selection more, the thought that it starts not when the previous Emperor dies, but basically when he's rejected by the Yang Sword for being too weak to be Emperor is that's so much more interesting than just having like 200 kids and then dying of old age and letting them fight it out.
And
because it feels like it's more of a destiny thing.
Which plays a lot into Priscilla's stuff too, right? And
Vincent's.
And Vincent.
Right, 100%.
And
I really like the way that it kind of starts, in which imagine seeing. I mean, Priscilla kind of says it, to herself or to other people. She was like, kind of, I don't really know that person. I don't really care that they died. This is something that I've been waiting for. It started. Let's go. I don't even have to think about it,
Mm-hmm.
But think about how gruesome it is, as a child, to watch your father be burned alive, and then think on the juxtaposition on the flip side of that. Think about how crazy your lifestyle has to be as their child to see that happen and not even feel anything.
It adds a lot more context into that moment at the beginning of Arc 7 where Subaru mentions to Vincent or Abel talking about his father in some degree and how he has that absolute disgust on his face and the revulsion. I now understand a bit more where Vincent is coming from that, because even though I don't know the context completely behind his relationship with his father, just the things we see from Priscilla's perspective here at the beginning of the Imperial selection just makes a lot more sense as to why he feels that way. Mm-hmm. And it also adds a big weight into Vincent's philosophy, right, of not wasting lives, of not wanting to propagate the royal family like his predecessors. That is a big thing.
Yeah, because we hear that. I don't know if it's from Burstett's or from the other attendants that were there, or if it was just Priscilla's perspective, that mentions that their dad had a small number of kids and that it was less than 100.
He was known as the seedless, right? Because he had it was 66, 67 and only
40 are alive at the end, or by the time the selection starts.
Yeah, and it's it's typically supposed to be around 100 to 200 as tradition, which is just like, wow, this is one of the least chaotic potential outcomes. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead.
This adds another really cool element to me of the whole like Yang sword, like King Arthur pull the sword out the stone, but instead pull the Yang sword out of the universe kind of vibe here.
Mm-hmm.
And just even though you could tell Dryzen, like the previous emperor, isn't like an asshole, right? Like you could just tell from his demeanor that he is a terribly not cool person. The way he goes out,
I didn't get that honestly at all. I got it as just traditional, standard, run-of-the-mill Valachian. Like very much, like this is just what's expected.
Well, Priscilla has like multiple moments where she's thinking on his reign and thinking like it just was not very good, like overall. But this moment was exemplar from him of like showing.
Yes, and the reason why she thinks that isn't because of his personality or anything like that, or him being particularly cruel. Rather, it's this sort of idea by the Valachian culture at large that they're in a steep decline.
Yeah.
That he wasn't as ruthless as he could have been. I mean, think about how we know the fact that Wilhelm had a war into Wallachia and stuff like that, and they fought, and they're not at war with the kingdom and stuff like that. And ever since then, it's like they probably think that the Vacan Empire is growing weak. You know, most a culture built on strength, to have a emperor who is admittedly lesser by their metrics in their culture, it's easy to be like, as a daughter who doesn't even know your father personally, be like, yeah, this guy was weak.
And it makes it for such a cool like action, like not exactly action moment, but like memorable moment of Dryzen literally being like, "Good luck, fuckers!" Grabs Jan's sword, fucking roasts.
Yeah, he pieces out.
And the fact that he like kind of like almost tricks his eldest son into just getting rid of the chaff, almost like the way he words it to like bring him in to grab the sword, even though he almost certainly knows, oh, he's gonna go up in flames.
Well, it's either he was going to go up in flames or he was going to be able to kill his father and prove his worth. It was a win-win for Dryzen.
Yeah.
Really smart.
It kind of now it may also this also adds context as to why they both can have the sword too, right? Like before that was a bit of like a thing of like, oh, how do the mechanics of this work? And now it makes the choice for Vincent not to kill her more poignant in that he's making himself weaker by doing it, right?
Well, this is something very interesting that we now learn. Vincent is truly not the rightful emperor of Wallachia when you think about it. I mean, of course, by our standards, by anybody's standards, he is the ruler of Wallachia, the emperor, but not by the right of the succession, right?
Well, he did succeed in the right. He made the active choice that after defeating Priscilla, that she got to go on and live.
But because she can still access the Yang sword, because she's still worthy of being the empress, like that means that his rule hasn't started yet in terms of their sacred blood right, sort of emperor pact that they have going on.
That's what they assume the situation is.
And it now adds an extra thing to me that I was already slightly thinking of at the end of Arc 7, but I didn't like fully consciously realize, which is, all of Vincent's setup for his death and stuff, Priscilla was also definitely like a backup in that regard, right?
Oh, I'm sure that was part of his plan from the beginning, that he needed someone alive to take over after he was gone.
Personally.
100%. No. Vincent wanted to die. He was like, I'd rather she rule instead. I think that's my read on the situation.
Now,
because it seems like from the little bit we get of establishing the relationship beforehand, that I got the impression that he basically raised her, at least up for these first 12 years.
I mean, they were closest as like actual brother and sister.
Yeah. And it's contrasted really well with another character I'm going to bring into discussion here now, Lamia.
I just want to say I love this Disney villain-esque. She is just unabashedly, horrifically evil, but beautiful at the same time. Like this standard evil queen, perfect villain for this kind of thing.
And the thing that makes it even better for me is there's a monologue moment where we get from her perspective where she's thinking about the elderly and how she hates the elderly, despite having Burstets as her advisor, by the way. But that's only because he's as competent as he is, which doesn't speak to some of his plans in Arc 7, I'm going to be honest. But, you know, the whole monologue she has of like, oh man, the elderly are weak, and you know, when I'm old and no longer beautiful and frail, I should just wither and die. And I was like, yes, this is the kind of villain I need.
Well, how do you have a villain in this situation and circumstance of everyone being awful and killing their brothers and sisters?
Mm-hmm.
I really love the idea of somebody who is so manipulative,
yes,
you know, and has been living her entire life being like the nice sister that everybody can, you know, rally behind and be stronger together, and then being like secretly being like, these guys are all fools, you know. It's, as you said, very Disney villain sort of thing.
And also it speaks to the strength of Teppei's themes in the story, because he knows, at least from his truth of the author, that's a short-sighted perspective, so she loses in the end.
Well, she's also just wrong. Clearly, everybody saw through it. If the 12-year-old Priscilla could see through it from the time that she was, like, 6 at the first tea party that they had, then all of her older siblings who had been ready for this for far longer than she had would know she's bullshitting them.
And that's the fun part about this, and we'll get to it by the end of her little arc, is that she thinks herself so clever, and then she is just summarily outwitted without much... you know, sanctimony. Like, so that happens quite a bit. I mean, with Al, we'll get to that later, but like, there's a thing where like people's best laid plans are quickly dashed in the story, and I think that's really, I think that's smart in a land in which planning to that extent happens so often and commonly.
I mean,
you know?
With her comeuppance, though, I do want to make my one complaint from this book. If I can just go on this tangent for like 2 or 3 minutes.
Oh, you are totally welcome to do that now on the topic.
This is probably the dumbest executed plan in the story, in that the whole 10 siblings double crossing her at the last moment makes no sense, when if they were working for Vincent the whole time, the moment the Pruning Corps engaged Cecilis, they should have hit her then and just not made it so that 2 armies had to go and kill each other for hours and hours and they fired the cannon, or just had them sabotage the cannon from the first place. The waiting until after everything else was done before they turned on her, I didn't understand how Vincent, as smart as he is, didn't have a better setup for that when he had 10 perfect spies around her for that entire time. They don't even have to attack her, just to ruin her plans before she actually starts them.
Yeah. Dramatic timing, I would say, on that front. I think like
only potential for, and this is not directly explained, so this is not going to be an excuse of that. My only way I could rationalize it in my brain is that evil eye sibling they have, the one that can track people and stuff. I wonder if their abundance of caution of like when they were to enact that was because of him. That's my only thing that I could even possibly think of in this scenario.
Well, they didn't deal with him until afterwards, though.
Mm-hmm. It was a couple months later.
2 months afterwards.
Yeah, 2 months.
Yeah. We're getting kind of jumbled in the order of things. There's some cute things that we could talk about here. One that I want to bring up is the cool perspective of the story of Al telling Schultz a story. Or is it Priscilla telling Schultz a story and Al's there, right?
Al is supposed to be downstairs during that time. I think he comes up at the end afterwards. It's Priscilla is reading a different book. Schultz asks, "What's it about?" And she pretends to read from the book, but instead tells her her story.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And we learn a couple cute things about Schultz, which is he can't read.
That makes sense.
It's just like, oh yes, you can't read. No worries, we'll teach you. You know, I don't need you to be my sword or my shield. I need you to be my staff. I need you to be my bearer of knowledge. Which is Priscilla's very cute way of being like, stay safe and read books, bro.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's something funny. I mean, this keeps on going into the mainline story. Like, Schultz wants to become a knight like Al, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like, Schultz is only there from Priscilla's perspective because she likes cute things, and that's it.
And in a weird way, I now realize that dumb training regimen Al has that he tells Schultz was also the double-handed thing of making sure Schultz wouldn't get too strong too quickly, so he could stay on the sidelines and not be in danger.
Well, I think it's part of it, but Al also, like, his whole, like, I only train for a little bit at a time, is probably, one, exaggerated by the fact that he does train against these battles for hours and hours and hours when he's in them.
Like literally, like, compressed time, training.
Well, it's not even with the training. Like, when, just from my own personal martial arts experience, you can practice the moves all day, every day, and you can get decent at them. You don't become a better fighter unless you're doing the sparring. But Al's existence with sparring and learning how to fight is spending hours and hours and hours fighting the same battle over and over again against every opponent he comes up against. So he mentions that he reached his cap. So his training regimen is at least enough for a normal human being from our world to reach their limit in this world.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen him. He's huge and ripped.
Yeah.
Like,
let's not mince words here. He is a specimen in of itself, but he is not as strong as, say, a real freak of warrioress.
Even like Heinkel.
Yeah. Even like Heinkel. Like, people who are genetically predisposed to being talented at the stuff or whatever.
Tigers.
Or have been trained since they're young,
I mean, Al could shine shoes with those cut, chiseled marble abs, but fucking Heinkel could, like, blow on shoes and they would be beautifully clean. It's like that level of degree of, like, different levels of input, right? Like, of just talent and effort. But this also adds a bit of context to Heinkel of, even though he's sweet on Schultz too in terms of being kind to him, like everyone else in the Priscilla camp, because Schultz is just the fucking best. Heinkel is really the only one who's taking his desires seriously in a way and helping him train.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Heinkel, despite the situation with Reinhardt, which is kind of out of his control, seems to be a relatively good dad for Schultz to have.
Yeah, very much so. And Al is the irresponsible fun uncle.
He doesn't even seem that fun. He just constantly seems depressing.
Yeah,
he's a very depressing guy. I think one of the things that, like, you have to realize about Al story, and just in general, I think I've come to find out, is that when you speak with Al, he will make it about how you shouldn't be like him, or like he'll dissuade you from hanging out with him because he's lame, He's that type of person who puts himself down all the time, and that's all he can talk about.
When we're in book 2, we'll talk about it more. But
yeah, exactly.
Al is a very prideful man. Let's just say.
Yeah, I think we can talk a little bit about Archaea and Priscilla's relationship here, because it's one of the first things in this book that's kind of
even just the first setup of, like, how that even comes in, right, with, like, the whole, like, assassination attempt, but the fun plot twist that all of the servants were in on it.
Yeah,
but it wasn't even her.
Yeah.
That's good.
And then that set up for being something else later in the story. It was really. I will say, Tapei did a really good job with the foreshadowing in this one.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of, like, really clever short callbacks in the story. I really like. I mean, it's very. Their relationship is presented in this in general, I would say. I mean,
it feels almost a little bit more one-sided than I thought it was before, though. Like, Priscilla definitely cares for Archaea significantly, but it's hard not to see, like, Chisha's perspective on the relationship be accurate. Right. Where it feels very much like a master and a pet, and not like two milk sisters as Archaea sees it as.
Yeah, no. Here's the thing. Here's my perspective on it, and here I'm extrapolating about Priscilla's character as well. Is that for Priscilla, not only does she see Archaea as a lesser person in general, just because of her capabilities and her, like, personality, but, like, I honestly think that Priscilla is the type who is so fixated by the aspect of things just happening serendipitously that she can't appreciate somebody that loyal aside from looking at it aesthetically. She talked about it in arc 5, where it's like, everything, like she'll keep the she'll let the bird fly because it's pretty and it's always mine, but I don't have to keep it in a cage. She probably thinks the exact same about Archaea. She's like, well, we are deer technically, but you can just go and do whatever. I don't really care. You could leave, you could go. I don't need you around, but I do like, you're kind of cute. Like that's really it.
Well, I'll ask you to keep this in mind then as you go forward, because I feel like because this is a child, Priscilla. She's 12 years old through most of the story, if even that. I feel like as she got older, her perspective on at least that specific relationship changed. And going into Arc 8, I want to see if you two feel the same as we get more from either of them on their relationship as they are now after so long apart.
Yeah.
Part of that is like the self-reflection aspect of Priscilla's character that I think we've gotten hints of in Arc 7 and in the side stories, the interludes between Arc, all those side stories that we did. In that we see Priscilla has this sort of recognition of her faults now. Whereas before, I think, being young as she was very enamored with herself, and her skill. I think nowadays she starts seeing the limit of her capabilities, and she's very like earnest about that. Even in this book, there was hints about like her being like, I know what I'm not capable, of this or that.
I mean,
but like,
in the section where we get the setup for the way this story is told to Schultz, she even ruminates, I am not perfect. I do stumble and fall, and it adds that element of like, even though it doesn't seem like it at all because they're so like continuous as characters, like child Priscilla and adult Priscilla, there very much has been growth there.
Yeah, I think one of the things that this really frames to me is that both her and Vincent, like, in the sense that they're both wearing a very clever mask. But even if you point that out to them, I don't think they would care. They'd be like, yeah, we all do. This is just my preferred personality.
Yes, and we kind of even get that with who is alongside Vincent in this story. Because at first, when we get the first introduction with him and Cecilis against Priscilla and Archaea, just in this first instance, it's meant to show like, oh, you have your rabid pet and I have mine. And it paints it as if like Ceci is Vincent's partner through all of this, when really it's Chisha, a close personal friend that focuses on the mind, not a wild rabid animal like Cecilis is. That's a weapon that he has, but it isn't who he's working with.
Yeah, exactly. It's this difference between a tool and an actual confidant, right?
Yeah, I mean, him and Chisha are genuine friends that care about each other a lot.
Yeah,
or care, I guess.
Enough to die for one. Yeah.
It's the kind of like wholesome element where even though you don't like read much of the actual thoughts of each other, you can tell from their actions of how they feel, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a deep kinship. Yeah.
I would just like to mention, this is not very important at all, but I just think it's really fun whenever I see this pop up in the story, which is that Priscilla plays a lot of Chartrange with Vincent. Chartrange mentioned!
It's Chartrange. Hey, we need a counter for every single time they talk about Chartrange in the story.
I was just like, oh wow, it's ReZero World Chess mentioned for like the third time. Woohoo!
Dude, last book they mentioned Chartrange, this time they mentioned Chartrange. Every single time Tepe's like, how do I make people recognize that I'm thinking about world building? Yes, Chartrange. Yes, they play Chartrange too.
It makes me chuckle every time.
It's a good little sprinkle of stuff here.
That's just like a very brief minor thing. This story also made me realize how much older Vincent actually is.
Yes.
I didn't, because he's over 20 years old in this story,
which is like close to 30.
So like
7 to 8 years before the like first season. So it's 8 to 9 years later.
Yeah, he's 28, 29, I think.
Yeah.
Which is I had always imagined that he's maybe a year or two older than Priscilla.
That's what I thought too, yeah.
But honestly, as well, up until reading this, I had thought that the royal selection was more like a Hunger Games thing, where it's like, okay, previous emperor died, everyone is fighting right now.
rather like a mini civil war battle.
I mean, a full civil war. They were marching across the entire country.
Yeah, and they've been planning this for a while. It's not like a sudden thing where they're like, "Oh no, the Empress." Everybody knew this was happening. They were preparing for it forever.
It's also
Yeah, even the guys who weren't planning to make a claim for the throne built up their own armies as well.
It's it very much it's like a it's a very I think it's a very Valachian thing for Valachian culture, right? To make it so, okay, we'll have this whole thing where the strongest needs to rise to the top to take control. But we also know that if we're at civil war for too long, the other countries are going to get a bit feisty. So culturally, if you do not hurry this civil war up, you are a fucking coward and you'll be like shamed. It's a very Valachian culture thing. It's like a very self-fulfilling thing. It's very fun.
I also appreciate that every single additional sibling realized that basically the middle child of Vincent was by far the biggest threat from the start, even though all of them knew he was not the physically even close to the most capable amongst them.
Yeah. I mean, it genuinely, if Vincent didn't have the Yang sword, he would just be fucked in any degree, if anyone of any degree of power even looked at him.
I mean, oh yeah, in like an actual combative fight, but he barely even uses it. He's doing it in a fake duel against Priscilla in this book. And up until the very end of Arc 7, it's the only time we've seen him use it.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't even use it when Olbart fucking killed him in that one loop in Arc 7.
It's too quick. He's not fast enough to react to that.
And he knows it. Because he just does it. He just accepts it.
Yeah, I mean, it's why Priscilla having access to it doesn't weaken Vincent's power at all. Because he doesn't need to worry about someone else using the power of the Yang sword against him. Because he doesn't need to use it.
Yeah. Which also speaks to the strength of Vincent as a leader and like what he does as well.
Yeah, it's why he wins, because he's the better leader, smarter man, and understands the situation better than everyone else.
He
don't need the magic sword to be king.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't focus on that. And that's the reason why I think he himself doesn't feel like he's the Valachian emperor, because he feels like the system's inherently flawed, so he's going to work outside the system to win on his own terms, you know? Like him saving his sister here was something that people, if they found out, would consider him a coward, would depose his rule. And that's probably why, as we said, what happens at the end of the story happens. But really, I think like this gives a very good colorization of how their relationship is, and it makes me understand the characters both better. I think like the society at large that they're forced to play in is exactly that, a play that they all have to take their roles in. Like, I don't think Priscilla's personality is genuinely what she presents. Neither is Vincent, but this is all that they can be in order to influence the hearts and minds of people around them.
I mean, it's proved even more in the story with Vincent even working with Bartori in the first place, right? And the whole element of me understanding that part of the reason now that I know Vincent better, the part of the reason he works with Bartori is for like an actual ideological reason, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if the reason why Bartori was willing to trust Vincent's explanation and reasoning and like get the other siblings on his side, even though they all knew it was going to lead to their deaths regardless, was that Vincent's plan was, I want to save Priscilla and not have to kill my little sister. Whereas Lamia's was, I want to kill all my other siblings to make sure we don't have to do this again.
I'm going to add another tier to that, in that even Vincent's like lack of wanting to have children and lack of wanting to have that selection process happen again. I think he would even he would divulge that to him as well. Be like, okay, listen, it's not just Prisca that I want to save here. I don't want this bloodshed between siblings to happen ever again. I think that would really speak directly to Bartori's philosophy in this book.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why it works so well, and that's when I immediately, when I saw him as a character and knew what he was going on, I immediately saw that thread of like, oh, so that is how Tepe is going to show the extension of who Vincent really is, right?
Right.
Ceci fucks shit up in this book, let it be known.
Honestly, this is my favorite iteration.
This is my favorite iteration too.
Yeah, this is him as a kid again, let's keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Well, he's like a teenager here.
I'd say, yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, around the
He'd be like
younger
30,
than.
maybe?
This doesn't show him as the same size as Ceci that we know in Arc 7,
Yeah.
but nor is he obviously as old as he is 9 years later. This feels very much like it's in between. It's 7 years before that, so he's probably like, what, 15 here, if I had to guess?
Yeah, and a very interesting thing is like how like, you know, obviously we know how insulting he is to people who's not worthy of his attention, but like in this book especially, it feels like he is just a tool that just gets used, and then when it's used, everything's just done instantly. You know, he's having fun his own way, but really he's just a wild animal set loose, as you said earlier.
I also really enjoyed this light novel's translation of his dialogue in particular.
I agree.
It flowed.
It felt... Yes. I like a lot of the way that they translated stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good dialogue writing in terms of how they're conveying the personality of each character.
Mm-hmm.
That I think like you'd have to do a lot of good. You have to do a lot of good insight onto what these characters represent in English to get that across. You know.
Mm-hmm.
I also, on the topic, this is just a total throwback as well, but on the topic of Lamia being like the evil like Disney villain, it's so funny that she's called Lamia.
Yeah, like a genuine monster.
Like a genuine monster.
Yeah, obviously.
it's
But her name is Lamia Goodwin. She wants to win.
yeah,
Wow.
she wants to win good.
Yeah. I just think that's very funny. We could talk a bit about like how the situation kind of ends up for Priscilla and how the selection ends.
Yeah, I mean, Prisca Benedict dies. Just full stop. She has a full grave. She was betrayed by her closest companion.
Yeah, think about that, right? Like, you know, Arkia, the most loyal, you know, tries to poison her, betrays her. That scene is actually kind of sad, though. Gotta admit,
it is.
It is.
I mean, I went into this thinking, okay, what I need to see most for my own benefit for Arc 7 and 8 is how did Priscilla leave this territory and why did she split with Arkia, who would have been fine in the kingdom? Like, she fits in there better than she does in Wallachia.
Yeah.
Probably get more demi-human racism. I mean, what is true?
I mean, yeah. I just mean that they seem to be more common for like the specifically animal people.
I know, spirit.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and also the spirit eating
thing would be kind of controversial in Lagunica, I think.
Yeah.
Well, it's controversial here too.
It's anywhere.
But it's not seen as heretical as I think it would be in Lagunica, or especially Questeca, right?
I really...
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah, if she... I think, now that you just mentioned that, I think Arkia has a bright future in the story if Tepe thinks hard enough about that part about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we see in this book that she's already consumed a portion of one great spirit.
Exactly.
An actual like whole ass great spirit. That was like a whole.
Well, no, not the whole.
The whole ass.
But
not the whole one.
But a part of the whole ass. A great spirit. It's was it the great spirit of boulders?
It's Muspel, the great spirit of the earth.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the one.
There's a slight tinge of me having read this story around the time in which we did our D&D campaign.
It makes a lot of sense.
That you can remember how I got some of this information. The thing that's really interesting, the Spirit Eaters thing, I mean, I really like the concept because not because of like, oh, she's spirits or whatever. It's the way it manifests on her body that I think is really interesting. I think like the juxtaposition of her being this very like you know, reserved type of girl who's very like loyal, like a dog, obviously.
Yeah, she's a dog.
But then like there's parts of her that's like very, how should I say, like unrefined, sort of like primal, that kind of comes through in like the way that she does things. What she's fighting, but it's just like all this bunch of like raw power. You know, it's not like any. It's very function over form.
Yeah, it's just throwing giant blasts. It's novaing all of her power at once for every attack. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I can't believe Chisha got full stabbed though.
On the topic of Chisha here, I do want to talk about him a little bit because his little moment where he's like, okay, soldiers pull back, we don't waste lives, not in this Emperor's camp, baby. I was like, yeah, that's right.
He seems like a cool guy.
Chish is just so cool. Chish,
Honestly, I like his design with the black
yeah,
in the art
hair.
here.
Yeah,
I was like, dang, he looks good here.
Ruminating after the end of Arc 7, Chisha is just a character that out of nowhere was just so cool.
Yeah, it's very much like a whole flip up. You think just this massive traitor, but he's been on our side the entire time.
Yeah,
even when Vincent doesn't want him to be.
He's been more on Vincent's side than Vincent has been on his own side.
That's why he took the name Vincent, and Abel took Abel.
And it's a great showing of Chisha throwing Vincent's philosophy out there of, okay, Arakia is completely killing these soldiers. Boys, pull back. I'm gonna fight this, and it leads to his big transformation moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we get to the point in which we figure out that the poison that poisoned Priscilla, it wasn't Priscilla. It was a body double that they're burying instead. The body double from the very beginning.
Yeah,
that's kind of fucked up.
I missed that was what happened. Yeah, I completely overread that. That's really funny.
Literally, they're like, we had to kill her, so it's actually we took an actual dead girl and threw it in an actual grave that looked exactly like Priscilla's. Everyone thought that she's dead.
It was a level of very morbid humor. I won't lie. I was like, oh!
That's what I mean. Like, when you really stop and think about it, like, this book has a lot of moments like that are no return by death. So, like, yeah, they were okay with this. Chisha was okay with killing this little girl that just happened to look like Priscilla for this plan to work out. It's kind of crazy. And honestly, yeah, it's really sad. Like, the idea of, like, we now see that, like, Arkia has, like, nothing else now.
Yeah.
All, like, this entire time thinks that Priscilla's dead. And insofar as she's just, like, well, of course she did the thing so that she could save her, but, like, she knows that she's alive, but she can never be with her ever again.
Yeah, I think that's worse.
And she's forced to serve just like a pet again, with somebody that she doesn't love. She doesn't really care for.
Well, it feels like Vincent doesn't treat her as much as a pet as young Priscilla did, because he does eventually put her up to, you're going to be like second-ranked divine general here. Like, I'm trusting you as one of my main sources of power.
No, 100%. Sorry, I want to clarify this. It's not the fact that he doesn't treat her as a pet. It's the fact that, it's the fact that he doesn't treat her as a pet that she doesn't like.
Oh, that's fair.
Anymore. Yeah. Like,
I guess that's why she kind of imprints onto Todd so much in Arc 7.
Yes, exactly. No, you understand exactly what I mean. Is that Todd is willing to use her like a pet, like she wants to be used, because she knows no other form of affection her entire life. So now she feels like she has no love in her life.
If we're speaking to like actual psychological things, her love map is kind of fucked.
Yeah, no, that's why I sympathize with Arkia a whole bunch more. Especially after reading this book, I was like, I understand where she's coming from.
This book has helped me care a lot more for Arakia and her perspective. I don't know if I would say a lot more, but definitely more for me. I would say a lot more because of how detracting she was as a part of Arc 7 for me, personally. I'm now at the level where she's just kind of okay for me.
And I also really like we'll get to the parallels later in the next book, but like how well done the parallels now seem.
Mm-hmm.
And how I also feel like there's now a path forward in the future for her, because there's like weird threads that we'll talk about with her and Al that I'm like, what does that mean? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, there's very pointed things that he's getting compared to like a witch, and I'm like, that is very interesting. Like Al's witch, right? And I'm like, why is that a thing that Al's thinking of? Why is that something that Teppei decided to write them together like? And I'm like, that's very curious to me. Sorry, we'll get to that in a second. Anything else you want to say about the very first part of this book?
I wanted to ask what you two thought of the other sibling that we get any time with, Palladio.
What was his personality again?
No, yeah, that's kind of my point.
Yeah,
He had a evil eye, so that was cool.
his character was literally, he was just a guy with an evil eye and incompetent. But I do think that was kind of the point of his character, but that doesn't detract from the fact of just how nothing burger of a character he is, which is very funny because Priscilla directly commentates on the fact that, wow, you have so much raw talent and you put it all to waste.
Yeah, literally, it's like she knows that this is one of the last, and it's her brother, right? And she feels kind of like just sad that it didn't amount to anything, you know? I think that's something that she's keenly aware of, like the irony of the situation of like this person should be somebody special. And like in a narrative sense, it kind of is reflected by like our feelings now, right? And we get to it later about like Ooblik, and then it kind of self-justifies itself. And I know that there's a lot more about the Evil Eye Tribe that's coming back around in the story probably sometime soon, because Tepe's author comment says, oh, we need to do more with the Evil Eye Tribe. And I'm like, yep, that makes sense. I also know that Stride Valakia, the previous Archbishop of Pride's wife, was
allegedly
an Evil Eye Tribe. Yeah, it was allegedly, you're right.
We don't want to get sued by the Valakian Empire here, guys.
Yeah, we can't say these things. It's heresy. He was just crazy, you know. He was enchanted by the evil eye witch into doing the things that he did. I think, like, that being said, though, yeah, it makes sense that now that I think about it, that's a part of it that's interesting. The reason why he probably isn't fit to rule, and probably the reason why he's so bitter, is because of the fact that the Evil Eye Tribe are so scorned in Vlachia because of what happened with Stride.
I'm sure that's part of it, but I think it was mentioned that outside of his own siblings, no one else really knew that was the case with him.
Yeah, but I think it's something that probably weighed on him.
Yeah,
I think
I just wanted to get your opinions on that for future stuff. Okay, that's the last thing I had to ask about.
I bet you we'll probably understand more about his character.
Yeah, I was about to say, now the whole scenario of the end of Arc 7, I'm sure we're going to have more to say about him in the future.
Yeah, he's going to have his name chapter. We're going to be like, oh, I understand who this character is. And then we're like, yeah, there you go.
Man, do you know what?
Yeah, maybe.
I'm really looking forward to? I'm really looking forward to the Gauze Ralphon name chapter, baby. Ooh, yeah.
Dude, it was a who's of every character that we Gauze Ralphon, even at the very end. He had to show up at the very end.
We are jumping way ahead, but I just have to mention, when Gauze randomly shows up at the end of this second part of the story, I literally was like, Gauze, it's you!
Yeah, it's a jump scare moment.
Of course it's fucking you!
You are under arrest on the order of His Majesty.
Yes, I am sorry. It's a real tragedy. Say your name and honor, friend. It's just like, okay.
Okay, bro.
But, yeah, he's a very honorable man.
Yeah, he's great.
Now it's time for Hours Depressed and Doesn't Care About Fucking Anything book.
Yeah, how very astute of a way to put it. I mean, that summarizes his entire vibe. Like, he's in a very annoying position where we meet him in this book. Let's just say it's annoying, right? He's in the Gladiator Island, and he does not like to fight, and the people around him are all dying or dead already. And he pretty much hates his life, but he doesn't. He hates his life, but he doesn't like death. There's no reason for him to die, is what he says in this book.
It's a thing.
It's not going to benefit anything.
It's a thing Priscilla observes of him and why she kind of has this like looking down, like full kind of vibe towards him, which is he's killing people to survive, but he hates himself, right? He devalues himself below other people, but he still takes their lives. That speaks to a level of arrogance, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Which is,
I think it's also like the idea that he, almost instinctually will grasp at anything to stay afloat. But like, how, as you said, arrogant is it that like that person simultaneously takes your life and then thinks nothing of his own?
It's very much the opposite of Subaru for me, where as Subaru learns, obviously Subaru regresses at points in the story. That is the whole bloody point. But the lesson he learns from Arc 4 of him pursuing his greed of the non-easy path, right? Of realizing I have to start trying to take care of myself and preventing my death as much as possible. But also saving the people that I can along the way. Where Al is very much to me I will use my life as a tool, but he gains a level of superiority from that. I got a very there was a moment in this book which sent a chill down my spine, which is Al has a friend in this section of the book called Orlan. It's his only real friend that I've met in the entire story so far. And he ends up...
he says as much.
Yeah, but that's what he says. But I'm going to go deeper into this because I don't care whatever the fuck Al says in his narration about how deeply he regrets Orlan dying. His lack of reaction to Orlan's death very much speaks to me of this man literally thinks that all these people are NPCs. The issue?
Yeah, no.
Well, I don't know if he thinks that they're NPCs. It's with Al's ability, it's inverse to Subaru, who sees everyone as, despite having seen them die, still believes that he can save them and preserve their life. Where with Al, he has seen them die and experience his own death so much more than Subaru has. That it's everyone's already dead. Death doesn't mean anything. I don't care about my own life. I don't see a reason to die just because it's not going to benefit anything. It doesn't change the universe.
Nothing changes.
Sorry, your stars were bad. This is just the end of your life.
Yeah, when you really think about it, Al's a sense that I'd never really even considered. Not only does he have to relive all deaths over and over again, it's the fact that he can't change the past like Subaru can.
Right.
You know? So even if he meets somebody that he's interested in, he can't let himself feel anything about them. He just has to think about surviving. Because even if he liked Hornet somewhat, or he thought she was interesting, or he didn't really, because of his apathy towards most situations. But given that he does, think about Subaru in the position Rem tries to kill Subaru, he has Al's powers. He just kills Rem, right? And then he doesn't even think about what if she had a perspective? What if I need to figure out why she wanted to kill me? Al doesn't have the luxury. He can't go back and figure out why the person who wanted to hurt him wanted to hurt him. You know,
he's stuck in a checkpoint.
Yeah,
he's his autosave is the battle.
Yeah, he has to overcome them. He has to decide to overcome them or die, and there's no other option.
I will say I think that also speaks to a level of Al's character because the authority often, the way it's presented, represents the person.
Right. It does.
100%.
But it feels almost self-fulfilling then, because Al can't let himself get close to any of these people. He's not going to develop a relationship with Hornet, who really likes him, because he knows they're going to have to fight to the death at one point, and it's just going to be more heartbreak. The only person on this island that he did get fond of and grow a friendship with is the one person whose life wasn't in danger. It was his guard, who should have been fine as long as he himself never fought him. And so I think that's why he's kind of the only death that he's upset about, is because it's the only one that he may have even considered still a living person at that point.
Yeah, because
he hasn't, at least not the only, but one of the few people he hasn't seen die either.
Yeah. I think that's a very interesting aspect to his powers, and in this sort of environment, he has to rely on it constantly. We see that he does these loops 100, 1,000 times, right?
Yes, literally hundreds of thousands.
Yeah. And one of the things about that is that, as you said, what does it do to one person's personality? I think, one thing is that he has to turn off the feeling of, pain. Because, think about, Subaru's death. He's died plenty of times, right? But he forgets about it, in a sense. He has to suppress it. You know what I mean?
It's called compentimization or whatever.
Well, because the one time he was letting it affect him, he almost died from the stress of it, and the Echidna had to intervene magically to save his life at that point. Yeah,
but Al, he has to forge through and experience it all those times. So what's the way to do it, right? It's turn off all emotions. I think Al probably thinks that he's acting rationally. But I think, very, in my opinion, him saying that guy was his friend is a logical justification to the thing. He doesn't feel any feelings about it whatsoever. You know what I mean? That's just my opinion.
I would agree with that. I I would also speak to, I think it's a very good showing that this authority of like time manipulation manifested through the idea of the sin of pride makes a lot of sense, in the sense of even the arrogance of Al, right, to think these people are already dead because he's seen them die because of his authority. That comes from the line of thought of these people are technically living beings right now because of me, in some sense, like for some of these people. That speaks to the degree of his arrogance, right?
Well, it's that, and it's also he just doesn't have the view of life that Subaru does, because when they're put in the exact same situation where they are in a gladiator arena where this is a fight to the death. Like, even though Subaru's was jumping straight to going against a mob beast, Al mentions in his first fight, if this goes on long enough, then we just fight a witch beast together instead. And if he had truly cared about this other person's life,
he would have,
and saw him as a living being, he would have done the same thing Subaru did and reset until he got them both out of there alive.
Yeah, and there's a very interesting perspective here, which is like, he doesn't really consider other people's path forward here. Like, we'll get to in a second, but like, even when there's like a chance for freedom for other people, he doesn't value that any higher than not being free. You know what I mean? He's like, yeah, I mean, I would like to not have to fight all the time, but at the same time, it's like, that seems like a bother, you know, like, he doesn't even consider the fact that, yeah, these people don't want to be here. They're slaves. Don't you want to free slaves? You know, it's something crazy like that.
Well, he even gets freed at the end, and he just stays to fight anyway.
I mean, he actually describes himself as the ultimate conservative, right? I want no change. Do not rock the boat. There's another element here that I find really, really interesting, which is his phrase of saying your stars are bad or your luck is bad, right? And I find this phrase in particular really interesting because of some of the information he leaves in his narration at points, where there's at one point in the story where he mentions, you know, I'm the only one that can do this sort of thing yet. And that immediately speaks to me of, oh yeah, Aldebaran following Star. He has to have some knowledge. Maybe he doesn't exactly know it's Subaru that comes, but he knows someone like Subaru is coming. And that can even speak more to his degree of how lazy he is, how he doesn't want to change, how he doesn't want to save others, right? Like, he's waiting for that person to do the change for him.
He clearly knows what's going to happen in the future, because he makes the mention that, oh, well, the strongest person I know of is currently walking around Lagunica with an elementary school's back. Because he's referring to Reinhard, but this is before Reinhard even becomes the Sword Saint. Mm-hmm. I'm fairly sure. I might be off on that. If it's not, then he still has been on this island since before that happened, so we wouldn't know about it otherwise.
Reinhard became the Sword Saint like 2 or 3 years before this, I think.
Then he's still 8 years by then at the island and wouldn't know about it. Mm-hmm. So he clearly has some precognition of what's going to be coming in the future. Yeah, and he's just living to get to that point.
Right, exactly. Like. He even talks about in this very book, I'm pretty sure Zach mentions that he lived through iterations of this world before. You know, I think that's something that he kind of directly says in this book.
Like, this is his new game plus, almost.
Yeah.
Like, I've heard that theory. I'm not sure I buy it if it's not just him saying, I've gone through this world before, as in minutes ago.
Yeah, exactly. He could be meaning like that.
I would feel more like that, because I feel like it's more poignant for him to have that degree of, I'm just waiting for Subaru to fucking...
Yeah. The thing about it that's kind of weird is that, like, there's a thing about, like, somebody that he should have saved, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, was that somebody when you had your power? Because if that's the case, then you should have been able to save them, because you literally can do it over and over again. But, like, unless it's the type of thing of, like, unless your life is directly threatened, who knows? Or is it a thing of, like, how does he know about all these? He's interested about silver hair and stuff like that. He has connection with them, but it would make no sense unless he's been around for a long time, or, like, you know, there's a lot of things like that you're like, who's this person?
Well, he is already over 30 years old here.
Yeah, but I don't think he's. I mean, he's older than that. Is just my perspective on it.
My crackpot theory that I mentioned before we added this podcast, and there is not much evidence. I'm just throwing this out there because I don't know if I could directly, at least at this moment in time, call Al like a he's a like parallel to Subaru thematically, but I don't think he's like another version of Subaru. I think he might be Flugel. I know that seems silly, but I
mean, I'm sure it's like one of the top 3 theories.
Yeah,
on the internet for him.
we've talked about it a bit about like, and I think here's my actual perspective. I think talking about it now, that we will get nothing out of it in a sense.
Yeah,
But I will say that we can talk about the added details here. That's kind of interesting. I think like one of the things that we kind of said, and I think it still kind of fits well with that, Flugel thing, which is just like the weird thing about him and his dad, Subaru's dad, that's like parallels, and how like even Flugel has, the kanji of Subaru's dad's name is about like wise tree sage. And
his dad's name was like the first is like it's Ken Ichi. Ichi is 1, and Ken is the same word that goes into both sage and sword saint.
Yeah, so there's a lot of like interesting parallelisms between
really
Subaru's
cool.
father and Flugel and Al. So like that's just stuff that I kind of thought, and we've talked about how he most like Subaru's father in terms of like his jawline and stuff like that.
That really adds another degree to which you could like parallel or compare Subaru, Reinhard, and Al all together.
Yeah, if it comes to pass.
If it comes to pass. But yeah, I guess we will talk more about that when we learn the more relevant information.
Yeah,
in the future arcs. That would be But yeah, some really cool stuff here. And the last thing I'll mention about the specific phrase of your stars are bad is it sent chills down my spine because there's a section where he's returned back to the island and he's fighting one of the gladiators that managed to survive this rebellion that happens in this part of the story. And it's a man who has like gone through everything just to survive. And he's just like, oh man, I guess your stars are bad. Gonna have to cut this guy's head off. It's just like, fuck, okay.
Yeah, here's an interesting passage as well. He's remembering. We'll talk about it. But like he's saying like the same phrase. It's like, dreams are for when you're sleeping, not when you're awake. Damned idiot, he grumbled. He looked up to the sky to see a half full moon. It looked awfully large, yet what drew his attention wasn't the moon itself, but the stars that stippled the night sky around it. Pinpricks of light beyond counting. Al stared at them for a long moment, then bit his lip. Bad stars, that's what's behind it all. And it's like, what is it? The stars are bad.
What does that mean, Al? What does that mean?
Yeah, I think he, we talk about stargazers, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
He knows about that very well, and we talk about the observers. He probably, I think there's actually a very interesting thing about it. He's not like Ublik. He thinks that Ublik's, way of going about things is a bit too, rigid, probably, or like too dogmatic. Like,
yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Ublik really comes at him being like, you're a true believer just like me, Al. And his entire time he's like, no way. Yeah.
Don't associate me with you.
I don't do any of that cringe believing shit. I'm a narcissist. I'm not a narcissist. What's it? The
nihilist.
The nihilist. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I'm just really sad about myself and all my past failings, man. And if I'm going to be honest, I just don't really care who lives and dies.
Yeah, but he knows that there's truth in what Ublik is saying, is the thing that we know too as readers.
And we also know that's why Ublik is drawn to him, right? That weird stargazer.
And also, I think like we talk about that man who entered into Vlachia, that sort of prophecy and stuff like that. And it's Al. Ublik meeting him here means that it's like, it's one of those things where like either he's been known, he's known this forever or not, I think like one of the things about, Al knowing about the observers and stuff like that is that it makes me wonder if his goal is in similar line to what my projected goal of Pandora is to break free from these gods, these deities that are controlling fate. I think that's part of it, but he's doing it for his own selfish ends. I don't think he's doing it part and parcel. Maybe he helps her somewhat through his own tasks and means. But I think, as we've talked about before, he has this very egoistic way of looking at the world. He wants to be, the sage, that type of thing.
So I have a minor theory I want to put forward to you two from this section. So we know from like the middle of Arc 7 that the Stargazers are kind of able to communicate their understandings to each other. It's how the one Shudrakian girl is able to sing a song that she's never heard before because she's getting it from another Stargazer. Because that happens when Utakata is like 4 or 5 years old. So that Shudrakian dies at about the point that this story is taking place. So she's already gotten that prophecy. If Ublik has learned that is true and knows that Al is clearly not from here and is dark-haired, if he's trying to get him off the island so that he would be in the location where that prophecy is supposed to put him at as a traveler.
Exactly.
And it makes exact sense why Ublik is there in Chaos Flame at that exact moment, because he's waiting for the moment in which the prophecy is fulfilled, where Satella comes back like that. Like he's like, "Yep, here it is. I've led everything up to this moment." I think that's very likely, and I think that's why he's going to be in the background being like, "See, I planned it. I've communicated."
Which is
with the stars.
Why it's very poignant that Al completely rejects these ideas and wants for doing this, because he's given up on being that follower, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Don't call me Aldebaran.
Yeah,
exactly. Don't call me Aldebaran. Yeah. It's very poignant. Like, you could translate it as, don't call me a mindless follower. I think he himself feels like he has nothing to follow.
Oh man, I cannot wait for you guys to get to the L relevant stuff in Arc 8.
Yeah, it's gonna be great.
I want to talk about this so badly. I'm itching at my heels.
And then there's more spoilers on Twitter that are probably more and more stuff.
You know what? I'm just going to remove myself from the conversation for 5 minutes. You two can keep with your Al discussions.
Yeah,
I will not be able to interject because I can feel myself this close to spoiling something by accident.
Yeah, we're vibrating. We're oscillating very close to the truth.
We're on the path, but we just don't have the destination yet.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the very interesting thing about Ublik is that he is positioned in this story as somebody who is trying to shepherd Al towards a goal, right? And we've talked about his independentry and how I think Priscilla, we kind of get this context. We can kind of put it the 1 and 2 together, even though we haven't read the side story that kind of puts it fully together. How he joins up with Priscilla and stuff like that. Without it, he was nothing. Following Priscilla, he actually believes in something.
Yes.
I'm not sure exactly what it is. Maybe it's her world working around her thing,
it's
to him.
It's the arrogance thing again. Yeah.
Yes. Not only is it alluring, but it's something that he himself embodies as a quality. But also it's something that he believes that in fate too, and serendipity as well. So in that sense, he feels like he is fated to follow along her path.
And it speaks to a degree too, because Priscilla's view of fate is a rather optimistic thing, right? It's built around me. Follow me. I will guide things not only to their rightful place of being under me, but by doing that makes things good, because that's what.
And Al very much so believes, and we were talking about there's the obvious. He sees the Dommy Mommy with big breasts that he talks.
I mean, that's the girl he's looking for as he speaks upon in the story. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also the thing of he needs somebody to kind of give him meaning again, and he doesn't want to think about life or death or anything. He just wants to serve somebody. I think that's very interesting. I think it's an escapism thing as well. He's been for a very long time aimless. The very first time somebody says, I can put you to use, he's like, I'm the tool. You know what I mean?
But my thing here is, especially if he wants to be the sage, not the hero, as we've talked about endlessly in our Arc 7 stuff, this comes to a point where I'm like, he's following Priscilla now But is he always going to follow her? Is my thing I'll put forward, right? Because he doesn't want to be a follower forever. He doesn't want to be that follower, right?
The thing is that's very interesting to me, and this is my perspective, is that I think it's a distraction for him. I think he's ignoring his responsibility.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Like, there's a faded responsibility that we get from Ublik in this, like implied by Ublik, through this story that he is ignoring, and it's like a final destination thing. You know what I mean? Like, eventually it'll come back. Pandora will whisper into your ear and be like, "Hey, Al, we have unfinished business. You remember?" And then he has to make it a hard decision. Or it's like, oh, Subaru is veering far askew from the path that he's supposed to walk. And we see, like, even in Arc 7, he's like, hey, you need to lock in. Because that's what Al is saying.
Because this speaks to the deeper, like, subtextual stuff here, if we're talking about what the hero and the sage is supposed to be. Because from, like, the world's perspective, the ultimate hero is a follower, because the ultimate hero is Reinhard, right? And Reinhard is a person that follows. He's never under his own directive. He's not fighting for his own desires. He's fighting.
Yeah, the world wants that to be a hero.
Exactly. And that speaks to the fact that if Al is supposed to be the hero, and that in turn would make him a follower, right? If that's the role he's supposed to play. Because if we speak from that perspective of the sage supposed to have the wisdom, like, if the idea before of, like, the hero being Ride before and the sage being Flugel before, Ride was probably under some level of directive from Flugel, because the sage is the one behind it all. Al's the one that wants to be in control, right? And that, I think, also speaks to his wider issues of, he must have terrible control issues with how his power manifests, right? Like, especially with how he views himself, I imagine he's very much a control freak in a lot of ways.
Well, yeah, that's exactly, no, but there's something that we just talked about that kind of takes that into an interesting duality, which is, like, somebody who's that much a control freak, the thing that's most liberating is when somebody takes control from him.
Yes.
So, like, when he thinks about the stars, like, he fights against fate all the time, right? He thinks about the stars, and it's a convenient thing for him to point at and be like, yeah, I guess I'm just
your stars were bad.
My stars are bad. It's not my fault. The reason I'm not taking action is because I'm having bad luck, not because he's avoiding the problem.
Yeah, not because I'm not thinking about everything, not because I'm not thinking about everybody else, not because I'm being selfish, not because I'm not training hard enough, not too stupid to figure this out, or I'm too self-centered to have the wisdom. This issue, and it's that I'm unlucky.
And this is another cool parallel we can draw between Subaru and Al, and this is why it makes sense that Al is a older man, a man in his 40s in the present story, because Subaru is always afraid of having achieved nothing, having being no one, being empty. Al is an example of someone who has grown older and hasn't changed and is still empty. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Al is a showing of what could go wrong for Subaru. Subaru never learning lessons, always avoiding problems, but staying an empty person instead of growing and finding himself. Al is a showing of, hey, wait, hold on, this could go really wrong. And it's not because of fate, it's because he's not facing his stars, as he would probably put it.
He hasn't accepted his stars.
Yeah. And that comes to a level of, like, the dissatisfaction of his arrangement, right? And that if he's supposed to be a follower and he doesn't want to be, maybe his life would be a lot easier if he accepts that part of himself and still finds more within himself, right?
Yeah, no, I think him being a follower in the past and being scorned by it is what has caused this sort of distrust in that belief. That true part of himself that wants to be a follower has been burned so many times. Like, it's one of those things where you're like, if Priscilla doesn't win the throne, then, like, I mean, she's probably not going to, at least not the Lugugan throne, that his, hope that he's put into her is dashed once again. It's another letdown for him letting himself being vulnerable. And I feel like it would be the final letdown for him, right? Almost. It'd be like, okay, I've had enough of playing this. I'm taking the reins now, kind of vibe.
So kind of on that note of, like, he's been let down before with, like, following Priscilla, We get a very brief mention in this story of another person in Al's life that we haven't gotten before.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know what your guys' thoughts on that were.
Very interesting to me that, like, I think the only characters that we've got it implied, I mean, we've talked about Pandora, we talked about whatever, but like it doesn't make sense, right? That who's talking about, because who cares about Pandora actually as a person, right?
Yeah.
Not even they even the witch cultists see her as some sort of boogeyman. Even
Killed her at the first chance he got.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Then like the thing that kind of makes me wonder is that the only other person that we've seen Al relate to is Rem and Ram, right? So when I think about that, I'm like, I don't understand how it works, but like there is something there that's like, that's all I can think of. And it's weird because I don't even know what that would mean.
The other thing that I can think of is that he mentioned something of like a teacher, right? Like
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what I was
teacher.
getting at.
Oh, teacher, yeah,
the
yeah.
one line of, "Oh, my teacher would beat me if they saw I was doing this." And it's just like, you wait, hold on. That adds another degree. He did have another person in his life.
Yes,
the silver
teacher.
person.
And it's interesting because teacher, like, in what way? What I mean by that
like
is
in a kid, the teacher kind of vibe.
yeah. But like, what I also mean by that is that he is not particularly skilled with a sword. That's emphasized very much in this thing. So a teacher who taught him what?
A teacher that teaches him maybe that he's supposed maybe he should be the sage instead of the hero. Is a thing I could posit. Like, oh, teacher, we're gonna make our own homebrewed sage.
Yeah.
Like it's home cooked, homemade.
Yeah, it's Hector of Tristis.
But the other thing I'll posit here, right?
Yeah, it's Klein. Yeah,
is oh my god, it was Clyde.
The melancholy.
That's why he's calling Arkia a beautiful woman this entire time.
Oh my fuck.
Yeah. He's an important character, guys. He's gonna come back around.
Oh, that reminds me of a what I think is a very funny joke I'll be making in just a second when we get to some of the Priscilla stuff. But the other thing I'll mention in terms of the follower aspect here, right, is that has my train of thought been gone? I think my train of thought has been lost. It was
always two there are, a master and an apprentice, a teacher and a follower.
Yes.
Strike me down.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Even though it's because of the timeline of how this is matching up, it's likely that he wasn't in the witch cult attack.
Right, yes. It doesn't work for him to be there when Rom lost her horn.
It makes, for me, I could still argue with this follower vibe that maybe he was a witch cultist still at one point. Because the way he holds a lot of regret about himself, it seems like he's committed terrible things, is the way it came across to me.
One of the things, yeah, you're right.
Like, and it comes to me of like, if Al is always this person that's supposed to be a follower, and he was like summoned at one point by Pandora or whatever, at that point in his life, he needed direction. He's similar to Subaru, right? Again, could have been one of his classmates kind of vibe. Very similar origin to Subaru of, okay, I need a direction, I need someone to follow, I need something to grasp onto. What if the first thing he had to grasp onto was something that was corrupting, the witch cult itself, right? That's where he got his first, like, taste of being able to follow something, like a religious devotion or, like, a devotion to the cult itself, right?
Or just someone to show him how to use an authority.
Yeah, exactly. It adds that element of, oh, okay, like, the thing he followed initially maybe was wrong. Maybe he has shame about that. And that transfers towards feelings of other things that he could follow, if that makes sense.
To me, the thing that always gets me back down in this theory, it's like you are a person, random person who's somehow not a random person, but it could be, right? Somehow related to, like the witch cult in some fashion, because if you aren't and you've gotten the pride witch factor, right? Who... If you're one of the Sitting Archbishops, or like the moment that it got transferred, how did it get transferred? One, two, if it didn't get transferred and it got stored, like we saw the Sloth Witch Factor get stored and stuff like that, then who bestowed it upon him? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At that point, it's like, well, it's Pandora, it's Sphinx, or
his teacher, or maybe they're both.
Yeah. Maybe Sphinx is his teacher. Maybe Pandora is his teacher. Like all that stuff is things that could be, because it's like that kind of makes sense because Sphinx was there during the thing with Stride, and if she had the pride witch factor to give Stride, then she could give it to Right.
And the other thing you can say
Maybe.
on to that degree is, like, I wonder then if for him in particular, it kind of makes me almost feel like that it is a parallel between him and Geese, with Geese's relationship with Flugel, of what which we know very little, right? But his thing with the box and like, oh, teacher, or oh, I'm sorry for master for failing you doing that. There's like, you could draw a parallel between these two characters too with that, right? That burden. But I think we've talked enough about this now. I think we've kind of gleaned out all of the marrow that we could potentially talk about here without us progressing in Arc 8. So I want to move on to some of the other stuff here.
Yeah, let's talk about Oobleck as well, just a little bit.
Oh, yes, we'll talk about Oobleck before we talk about the Priscilla stuff. Yes, because...
Must we?
Because...
Well, we'll talk about it quickly, because it's funny. I like it.
It's funny.
I think
it's a really funny reveal. I'm not going
to... It's an interesting characterization in a way that, I mean, we talked before, I think, Tapei very scarcely talks about themes of sex and stuff like that in his books. I think the way that he talks about it here is also very interesting. I mean, I think Priscilla, you know, she mentions it. This is a 12-year-old girl, by the way, saying something like, well, that's your own form of power that you're using, you know, to grasp the future that you desire, right? And it's like, what, you know, like, this is coming from a 12-year-old girl or whatever, 13.
She said that if she had needed to use sex to get her marriage, it wouldn't have lasted more than one night.
Yeah, one night.
She's willing to do it.
Yeah, it's a thing of she's basically saying that depending on what desire you're wanting to achieve with something, sex work is not a shame or a sin, right? Like, it's another tool in your disposal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is one of the very first times in the story that we've gotten explicit gay stuff going on as well. Like, Oobleck is
aside from Roswell coming on to Subaru.
Yeah. But that's not as
that was played as a joke and not serious, right?
Yeah. But the idea here is that he's the leadership of this island he is sleeping with, which is very funny, and that's the reason why he's around.
Now, I feel like a lot of that's implied, because I know it's directly stated he does it with a lot of the female gladiators there. I don't know if they...
He does. He had seduced the leader to get chance to do this rebellion.
And he seduced the leader of the whole island itself, right?
Yeah, like the governor of the island.
And the implication of also it being Al's guard friend too, right?
I don't think so.
I don't think that was part of it.
Because
Al's guard friend got caught in the crossfire.
Yeah. I know, but there was a mentioning there of like, oh, I had to make sure his guard was let down.
Oh, right, you're right. That's right.
Oh, he was implying like, oh, I just pretended to surrender and then I killed him when he came to arrest me.
I thought the implication was there
that
he seduced him. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's sort of it. I think one of the things about that though is like, it makes Oobleck's character even more weird in the sense of like, or I wouldn't say weird in the sense, I think like the lack of care about this because of his fate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that like, well, we can talk about a bit more about like, it's an interesting narrative thing that could be explored a bit more if Oobleck was an actual person instead of a guy who's just a dogmatic religious zealot, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the sense that, you know, people who are minorities usually have to go through, you know, these sort of more illicit channels in order to grasp power, as Priscilla said. And as the Evil Eye tribe is there, you know, the only way that he could amass some sort of freedom is through using this sort of way. You know, he starts talking to Al, being like, "Oh, you're a handsome fellow. Why don't you go ahead and flirt with all these women?" You know, and that's because Oobleck sees that as the potential that he has in order to influence people, you know, his good looks.
It speaks also to his thinking of like him being a tool of fate, of even his body itself being a tool.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what it's supposed to convey, is that he doesn't really even care what he has to give.
It's not even that his profession is a prostitute. It's almost like his soul is that of one too, right?
Yeah.
In that is what I think Tapei could potentially be saying with that.
No, I agree. I think that it makes it slightly more interesting. Oobleck in this story is obviously written in the facsimile of he's pretending to care and be this Genki boy, energetic boy who's very like cutesy and fun, you know, but like we know that's all just nothing inside. Yeah, which is part of it, and we get that at the very end as well.
Which is like, oh, now I know why they're Al and him are also kindred spirits. They're very empty people.
Yeah, and that's why, you know, he's so obnoxious and Arc-7 also, but it's not. I don't really care about it too much here because there's interesting stuff happening. But yeah,
but the other thing is his instant like just lock on with Al of like immediately, okay, this is my traveler. Now it gives me context and makes me understand a lot more why he fucking suddenly shows up in Chaos Flame, as you were mentioning earlier, Gold, with Subaru.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's that he necessarily suddenly showed up, because quote unquote Vincent and Kafma and not Ublik, Olbart were all there, and he was like in the council with the other generals. I think he just came with Vincent.
I mean from Subaru's perspective, a Deus Ex Machina, random guy comes in here.
Yeah. There's also part of it that makes me wonder, I think we talked about before, if the transmissions jar, you know, in terms
maybe,
of like,
It's like a game of Chinese whispers or whatever, right?
Yeah. It's like there's a guy with black hair and the stars are twinkling, and that's the constellation that says black, and that's one that says hair. And is coming to where? Okay, I guess he's coming here. I guess I'll have to keep my eye out. You know, it could be something like that. You know,
we'll get more context on how the stargazing stuff works later.
Right.
Yeah. Can we talk about the Priscilla stuff now?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
You mean her "hey fuckface" speech?
I want to talk about how she's married to Jorah Mormont. I mean, sorry, it's Jorah Pendleton.
Yeah,
Jorah Mormont would probably want to marry her for other reasons.
He also wanted to marry a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
That is very true.
I'm just saying, there's a parallel there.
I wonder if that's an actual explicit reference. I wonder if Tepes ever Game of Thrones, probably.
It would be very funny if that's an intentional reference. I would very much enjoy that. But the plot twist on that aspect is Jorah? He's a bit of a Giga Chad, isn't he? I mean, he's
kind of nice. It's just he's a good guy. I think that's about the extent of it.
I would say being just a nice guy is being a Giga Chad in Valakia. Okay.
Yeah, that's true. I think one of the things that we kind of talk about is that he's almost 50. He doesn't really have a wife at all.
No family.
He doesn't have a kid. He
got nothing to lose.
Yeah, he's not really charismatic. People don't really respect him too much. He does this nice thing for this little girl, and everybody in the story, it's actually kind of funny. I mean, it's funny in the sense of like everybody's like, "Oh my god, I don't know you had it in you." I that's not the weirdest thing a Vlachian nobleman's done. And I'm like, I believe.
Yeah,
that.
This happens apparently.
Yeah, exactly. And we know that.
Oh, hi, little girl. Is your dad here? It's like, that's his wife, dumbass.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing of like that's a very Game of Thrones, but it's also like implicit in the fact that you become an adult at like what, 14, right?
15.
15.
But the fact that people are getting married off at that age before that speaks again to Valakia.
No, but I think probably in the story as well, 15 is also the age people probably get married, like royals do.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, it is strange. But yeah, it's one of those things where they have to be like, yeah, that sounds good.
Well, I didn't know you had that. When we were in EX1, we were like, there was a whole chapter about 4 years, like a potential proposal to someone who was significantly older than him.
Right.
So it's not just Valakia.
No, I wouldn't assume it would be. I mean, I think that's sort of, explicit in the text that this is just sort of the way that the feudal society is. It's sort of, you have to secure the bloodline somehow eventually.
Which also speaks to Jorah just not doing that. He's just kind of lived his life.
Yeah, I took the thing that Priscilla said about it would have lasted a night, not in the sense that she would have tolerated it just for a night. It's more that, no, she would have killed them immediately if that's what...
I had taken it as, if I have to consummate the marriage to secure the marriage and then kill him afterwards, then that's just how it would be. But it might be a different...
Yeah, I think she might be kill him immediately.
With Priscilla, I can read both and not make it feel out of character, which I know seems strange, but I could see both responses being a potential.
Because she doesn't get anything if she kills him immediately.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
There's no benefit to her doing that.
She marries him for his knowledge, right? Like these ancient books he has.
Right. Which he doesn't have access to if she marries him and then he says consummate and then she kills him.
Yeah.
If she marries him consummates, then kills him, there's a decent chance she could just inherit it from him
just
instead.
be like, okay, he has no direct heir. The wife should inherit all of his properties.
I understand what you guys are saying, but I think that she has a very like high standard for that type of thing. She wouldn't stoop that low, you know. She only does it on her own terms.
Her second interaction with Subaru was lick my feet. I don't know if that's necessarily true.
No. That was a tease. That was a lark. You know, she did that as a jest as she's an adult. But as like a 12-year-old, she probably is like, that would be the last thing that I'd want, you know, a 50-year-old man. You know,
I'm sure it would. I just wouldn't put it past the pragmatism that Priscilla has.
Maybe.
Everything works out in her favor.
Well, that's the thing. I think that she is inherently pragmatic to the point of she would kick somebody's face if she thought they were disgusting, licking her toe, you know? So that's what I mean. She has higher standards, I think.
I would like to bring up some old friends come to visit that we mentioned a bit earlier, but Balleroy and Miles, baby, they're back.
Yeah,
I know, right?
And this time, Miles is a chill, fun older brother instead of an evil slaver like he is in EX1.
But the art made him look more evil than EX1 did.
Yeah,
exactly.
I know, right? His face is just evil face.
It's very much, oh wow, there are two sides to a person, huh?
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, like, the evil face that he has is just funny because, like, we see him in Arc 7, like, some of the art of, like, him with the dragon or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like he just looks like a nice, like a weird looking, scheming old man. But you're supposed to look at him fondly, like, oh, that's you know, Miles. You know, he's a cool guy.
It's just the spindly older brother.
Yeah, and then you're like, well, you know, he's a slaver. But, you know, don't worry about that part. You know, it's funny.
Well, I mean, his whole thing with having, like, we know from Arc 7 that he's the one that goes in and, like, rescues Flop and the Medium.
Yes.
And then that they grow up alongside Balleroy in Serena's care. But as Balleroy explains here, that Miles is the one that raises them.
Yeah.
Yeah, the complex web. I mean, I think introducing these characters here, and they feel like cameo queens at this point. They just show up whenever, like, they need to, you know, we're doing the EX novel in Vlakia flashback up. We have to have Balleroy show up.
Well, you two specifically have kind of river songed from Doctor Who,
we have,
Balleroy, where you started at his end, then went back to how he died. Now here's where he was kind of cool.
He was kind he was when he was young, spry and coming up.
We're getting at all points in his life, like one after another.
Yeah,
like we're getting him resurrected as a zombie. We're getting him, you know, here back when he died, and now even further back, we're getting him when he was alive.
Yeah, the only thing you're missing now is, like, everything before this.
Yeah,
I'm sure we're gonna get. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we'll get at some point. Yeah, it's also really funny to me in that. Oh yeah, EX novels, side content. You know, we're gonna have some knowledge that will be useful in the future and stuff. But no, like a lot of these novels, information is super relevant to the future of the story.
Oh yeah. I mean, we'll talk about it before, like, or where we talk about it, like, briefly. It's just like the parallelism of the Gladiator Island and everything that Subaru does is, like, so insane that I'm like, whoa. You know, like, if you didn't read this, as you said, it's Clone Wars moment. It's like, everything here is contextualized so much better. I think Balleroy here also is interesting in the sense that we're, as you said before, like, they're Serena's, you know, Sky Dragons, and all this stuff, and you're like, oh, I understand how all this connects, you know, and why these characters are reintroduced in Arc 7 and why they're in these EX novels is like, okay, they're connected through these degrees of separation, you know?
Like, we saw in Arc 7 that, like, Roswell is connected with Serena to bring her to their side, whereas Balleroy's been resurrected on the other side.
Mm-hmm. It would probably have to be like, okay, now we have to know why Serena knows Priscilla, and we get this little, you know, thing, you know?
Why does she owe her a debt? Why is she her contact, right?
Exactly. Yes. Like, why would she be willing to help out on this side? It's like, oh, well, you basically saved my life before.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
I also this felt kind of sad, but seeing Miles Skydragon like save everyone's life just to know that Reinhardt comes and cuts it down with a single swing later was really sad.
It
Like,
was.
man, this dragon's just a hero. He's saving everyone, like all the kids and the families and everyone else who's here, not as like part of this fight. And it's just he's doomed to die to Reinhardt.
He also has such a cool name. I love the name Gaius for a dragon.
Yeah, Gaius is great.
It's a good name.
Definitely cooler than Miles.
Fucking Miles.
It's like his name is Greg.
It's like it's such an unvernacular name.
It's like his name is.
Well, it fits with Todd. Yeah.
Todd,
exactly.
yeah.
What's just to briefly jump back to the Al stuff just for a second. A thought I kind of really had while watching this and seeing much more in depth of Al using his authority again. Todd would be able to like take out Al, and they've never really had to fight against each other yet.
You're right. Yeah.
Because Subaru's way of dealing with him after the first time is something Al could do, but each time Todd basically makes the scene, there's nothing that Subaru can do to stop it from happening.
You can't outplay it, as it were. Right?
One thing that I just thought about just now is that Todd doesn't have the authority that Al has, but he passively has it because he's just that skilled.
Basically, if Todd had Al's authority, the entire world of ReZero would be fucked.
Well, what if Todd does have a similar authority and just has never needed to use it?
No, okay, even bigger.
He's never died.
Even bigger plot twist. Nah. I'm going even further, right? Okay, so if Al dies in the future and someone's going to inherit his witch factor, boom, 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 it's not going to be Subaru. It's going to be Todd, baby.
It's the pride witch factor.
The big bad.
That would definitely be interesting.
And then it would just be the cute, stupidest Uno reverse of, oh, Pandora, this big setup threat. Oh, Echidna, this big setup threat. No, Todd just ganks them. Yeah, it's me, guys.
Yeah.
It's just Todd.
But that to a point of like, it's weird. Now that I think about it, it makes perfect sense because Todd and Al are paralleled in this exact scenario with Arkia.
Yes.
Yes. So, in a sense, that there are these cruel, efficient killers that she is alongside fighting with. I think that's an interesting note that to pay sort of thought of. It's good. It's good stuff.
It's also just there's this really fucking morbid moment where we get this moment, with like Al and Arakia, where Arakia is just basically like, yo, I'm kind of I'm sad right now. Do you want to die? No. Help me out here, bro.
Yeah.
And it adds that. But then they get the moment of when they arrive back on the island. They arrive on the part where they throw the corpses away and like all the junk and stuff. And there's this really fucked up moment where Al's thinking about it. He's like, man, this is a really smart way to go about this. It doesn't waste anything, All those mar beasts in the water, they get to have their lunch, and it's just like
the cycle.
It's just
the cycle.
Fuck. Like,
well, I think that's his moment of realizing, there's a weapon in here I can use. Actually, it's just not telling the audience that is what he's come to the understanding.
I know,
of.
but also the characterization of just looking at all these dead people, all of which he knows, and just being like, oh man, this is so efficient. It's just like fuck.
I think like the idea of like something I had a thought of is like the ReZero world, or like of Lackey at least, has all these threats around it all the time, right? All these people with crazy abilities, mob beasts and whatnot. And it's like for the regular person that lives and tries to fight, like Todd or Al, right? To strain against, like fate like that, it probably feels like the most courageous and, like consuming thing possible. Like, no wonder why I drove them crazy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's something that I can't help but consider.
Mm-hmm. I guess we're not going to talk. I don't think we'll probably talk too much about the character of Hornet herself, because I don't think she's like too big of a crazy character.
She just wants to fight Al.
She just wants to fight, right?
She either wants to fight him or something else to him.
Something else to start with.
Something else. Yeah, for sure. She wants to fight him in a different kind of way.
I think her design was cool.
I love her design,
yeah,
and also the fact that she parallels Al and that. Oh yeah, I've got both my arms cut off, but I'm still one of the strongest. Is cool.
Yeah. They both what was it? They both got cut down in rebellion at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
They were the only two survivors, right? Yeah.
yeah, only two survivors of like this whole Marbeast battle they had 4 years before, I think, at that point.
Right.
Yes, I think so.
But the really cool I say cool as if like it's like a oh wow, like Al's the coolest. I mean more like his fucking one-liner at the end of the fight where he's like, oh yeah, I just 800 attempts to get you in the right spot of me burning this one specific corpse that was really good foreshadowing earlier in this part of the story, by the way, I will not lie. To like, oh yeah, I've poisoned you, and it's totally in character for him to just be like, I'm not going to finish you off the way you want me to. I don't want to die. I'm just going to watch you die of poison.
I just realized something, by the way, Connor. You were like, why did Teppei in Arc 7, why did Teppei write something about Subaru and poison?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's exactly the reason why. Because he wanted to write poison. Like, he was trying to parallel this exact scene so well, like all the scenarios, that he had to write down, okay, there has to be something with poison, there has to be something with, he could save somebody's life through his, gladiatorial bouts that he didn't, right? Like, he had to, like, kind of juxtapose the two characters. Yeah.
And how,
so it has to be like, Super doesn't want to use poison.
On this island, yeah.
He sees how painful it is. Here, Al uses the poison against her dishonorably. He doesn't even care about how painful it seems. He doesn't even do her the dignity of killing her quickly.
That's despite the fact that this character really likes Al too. Like,
yeah.
Well, she was also just fascinated by his ability to not die in all of his fights.
Yeah, but it's also the human element of, even if you don't like this person likes you, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think,
and Subaru knows that very well.
He does. He all too well, I would say.
And like she's painted as the antagonist against Al in this story, but she was also the champion of all these slaves that were trying to fight for freedom.
Yeah. She was the good guy.
I'll put down the hero.
Yes, no, exactly. That's the thing, right? Like the whole framing of this sort of arc is that Al is going against doing the good thing because it's uncomfortable for him. And he's being given the opportunity. It looks like, you can be the champion that we need.
Yeah, it literally juxtaposes Subaru's arc of becoming the revolutionary, right? Becoming the one that's going to wave the flag of Pleiades, and we're going to fucking be so cool, and we're going to change this shit because I hate Valakia!
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even Al, I think, even has a thought that he hates Flag in this.
I mean, in some of the stories side content we read for Arc 7 itself, there's a moment where he's like, I hate that country.
But he does, but he won't do it to help other people. He'll tolerate it himself, he'll stomach it himself, but he won't help other people, be liberated from it. Even when he's given the most perfect opportunity to do so.
And even though he has something that, even though it's inconvenient and that it's not as flexible as Subaru stuff, he has a thing that could save a lot of people if he really tried. Like, whole ass, for real. He could make the lives of a lot of people around him so much better. He just chooses not to.
And like, Al is given the logic of, well, he gives the excuse of like, well, they have 9 divine generals. If we go at, this freedom, they'll send them towards them. And then I think Ublik's like, well, they won't do that because then they'll be free to attacks,
Mm-hmm.
So it only sent like a couple. And then he's like, well, I don't really care.
They're probably doing it in 2 spots then.
Yeah.
And really, he sends 1 active divine general and 1 potential divine general against him. And like that's the most that Vincent actually sends.
Yeah, one of the little girl,
Because the whole time it was actually a plot to kill the Emperor.
An aimless little girl. Yeah. And man, like, yeah, I really like the idea of like, I think there is something there with Archaea and Al that I'm not 100% sure on yet.
Yes, I agree.
But I'm like, this pairing seems a lot more tender than usual. We talk about like Al not really showing too many emotions. There's part of him that wants to care about Archaea here.
Well, I think it's the silver hair part of it. Like he clearly doesn't want to have an attachment there. But there is a history, and it is bothering him the entire time.
Yeah. He's like, I guess I'll try to save her.
But it gets a parental vibe. I very much of, because he thinks directly, I want her to to have kids and have descendants.
Right.
That's
He's
the
like,
thing. That's the thing I change, right? One
Yes.
day there's going to be a family because of me.
yeah, he's like, maybe one day their legacy will change the world. He doesn't even think about himself changing. He's like, maybe if I do one good deed for this one person that seems exceptional, and maybe that's the reason why he follows Priscilla. He's like, actually, she's more exceptional than I could ever be. So maybe she'll change the world into the way that I want it to be.
He actively tries to take down Arakia when they re-meet in Arc 7. It just is not able to and gets blasted out the window instead.
Yeah, he does.
Which now
But he was going for her.
Which now means he, at least at that point in time, he has a some
goal.
sort of goal that is more important than having that wish
Right.
of her having descendants, right?
Yes. Also think that it's very interesting that scene now juxtaposed with what we know, because it now seems more like, I would say, cruel. You know what I mean? I would say it's not cruel, like, in the sense I don't think Priscilla's being cruel, but like intentionally. But like, we now see that, you know, really she doesn't have to treat Archaea like a bother. You know what I mean? Because really all Archaea wanted is like, oh my god, you're alive. I want to make sure that that's you.
Because
And then it's like, you're being a fool.
Well, so in defense of Priscilla for that, the other person that did know she was alive and that she confided in got arrested and killed for knowing.
True. Yeah, I think that's probably part of it too. I think like it's hard to know because Archaea knows that Priscilla's alive, right. So like at that point, you might as well. I mean, I know why, because I don't think Vincent wants her loyalty to be, you know, and Priscilla's power to be like, because like if Priscilla had a divine general at her beck and call, she could reestablish parts of her legacy back. But in doing so, it also paints a target on her head again, and she's not strong enough to survive those targets yet.
Arakia's power is definitely not nearly what it is here than it is in Arc 7. I think the fact that she spends the next 8 years living, fighting, and training with Cecilis makes her as powerful as she is.
A monster like him.
Exactly.
But what Arakia being with Priscilla represents, or the reason why Vincent can't let that happen, is because it's walking her around with the biggest identifier of Priscilla.
Yeah.
Of like her loyal silver-haired spirit-eating dog person.
Yeah, so
companion.
like, oh, she's dead. I have her servant now. That's it, right?
Exactly. If she's ever seen with another girl that looks anything like Priscilla, everyone's going to instantly figure it out.
It would literally compromise on Vincent's goal of keeping Priscilla alive.
Exactly.
Yeah. I also just realized something, which is like, a part of it, I wonder if it's a see that they're both coordinating in between each other subliminally of like, Vincent's like, I have to pry you away from this codependent relationship, and Priscilla's like, you have to learn to live without me, you know. And they both have their own view on this, which is like, Priscilla's like, I'm going to forge my own path, and whatever that, you know, comes, you have to forge your own path too, right? Because you deserve it. You have to be free. Well, as you said, she doesn't have to have the butterfly in the cage next to her. She can just know that exists, right? Whereas if Vincent, he's like, you're not loyal to me. I don't need you to be loyal to me. Be loyal to yourself.
Because for Vincent, it's all about the imminent future of stuff is going wrong. I need stuff in control and where it needs to be. Like he needs his chess pieces where they have to be. Whereas Priscilla believes the whole world to be her garden, and it doesn't have to be in her direct view for it to still be hers.
Yeah.
The last thing I'll mention here is with the stuff with Owl and Hornet and the whole thing with the parallel between what happens with Arakia in this thing and how Owl treats her in Arc 7 is the phrase Owl says of when the illustration of his the tiny bit of his face and his smile pops up of no one can beat me. It draws that parallel between that scene where he's fighting Arakia for me.
Mm-hmm.
Of like, oh yeah, he's just like, oh man, I can just power through this.
The reason why no one can beat him right now is because the only win condition is himself.
Yeah, exactly.
In the future, if Priscilla goes, that's a lose condition. He has to restart. It's why he goes into fights with the sword at his neck, ready to kill himself if it doesn't go perfectly. But here, it's the most selfish. I'm not going to die here. Like that's the only way that time goes forward is if I come out of this victorious.
So my thing is something bad going to happen to Priscilla that's going to make Al become an instigator? Or is Priscilla going to do something that makes Al disappointed or disconnects from that? That's what I'm feeling right now.
Like dropping out of the race or something?
Dropping out of the race, is something to that degree of like rescinding on something. Like Priscilla being, having a more human moment. Not in like a tender way, but I mean in like a mistake, like a major mistake that could happen.
Fair enough. I am struggling to even say anything without giving more stuff away, so I'm going to call my discussion here for today.
Unless you have anything else, Gold, I think this is also a poignant place where we can stop.
Yeah, I mean, I think I really liked this book. I really liked everything involving. I'm very excited now for getting some of these answers.
Yeah.
Now that we have the full context. It was worthwhile reading all these things.
It was.
The EX novel wasn't as informative. This one certainly was, and I think it just gets me excited to start Arc 8 very soon. What about you guys?
Yes.
I cannot wait for Arc 8. I think Connor was frothing at the mouth and wanted to talk some Arc 8. So,
oh yeah.
We are rushing ahead to that. I'm so excited to get to it. I feel like the build up with these novels has really like expanded not just my desire to learn more, but also like, okay, I have this extra bit of information. What am I going to extrapolate from the truth from the main story, right?
Mm-hmm. It's reached its tipping point.
And the other thing I'll mention is whenever we do get like an EX6 with the third of the Willology, it'd be kind of cool to do the Willology at some point, as like all three.
I think that would be great to do after we finish Arc 8.
That's exactly what I was thinking. But yeah, this was a really fun one. Tell us what you thought in the comments below. Let us know if we were right or wrong. What are your guys' thoughts and feelings on this sort of stuff? And are we the sages? Have we figured something out? Let us know. Let us know.
Until next time, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.